Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Dungeon, and more importantly, welcome to the Dark Thoughts Talk programme, brought to you by Dark Media in collaboration with Idealux. We're very happy to be back here at Clerkenwell Design Week, and over the next 3 days, we've got a packed programme of talks and discussions covering some of the biggest themes in the lighting and design spheres. We're going to be talking about some beautiful projects and having some conversations with the masters of their craft. So there's going to be plenty to inspire you here this week. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Matt Waring. I'm the editor of Arc magazine. There's some copies of it just over on the table as you came in. Please grab one because we work very hard on it. And together with my colleagues Helen and Ellie, we'll be taking you through things here over the next few days. So, opening things up today, we're going to talk about lighting as a long-term investment and how we can design for both longevity and adaptability. 2 words that I'm sure many of you will have heard in your project. Over the course of the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to examine how these requirements can be achieved in the work that we're doing. So joining me for this discussion, I'm very happy to be joined by our esteemed panel of experts. So with us we have Magdelana from So It Is Design, we have Jack Pannell from Common Ground Workshop, and we have Chris Simmons from Orluna. So thanks very much for taking part today. So, my first question. The title of the talk refers to long-term investment and the need to design for longevity. Is that something that, we're talking about that as if it's a thing that isn't commonplace, but is that something that should be a regular feature in all of your projects? And we'll start with you guys first, Magdalena.
I think it should be a must for every designer. When you take a project in, you have to see what is the longevity of the project and actually try to give the client a little bit extra. Because many times people go with the rush and say like, oh, projects flip very quickly, so it doesn't matter. But actually it does matter because you want the client to best the right lighting for the right place. So for me, that's a must.
Sure. Jack, would you agree?
Yes, I guess a lot of our work traditionally involves the design of kind of systems from the outset. So I kind of mean by that we create lots of sort of hybrid spaces that can adapt in use with an existing operator, or that might need to change and involve many different operations, or if that operation goes bust or moves on, the landlords like spaces that can be easily transferred. So I think a lot of it's not just about the kind of aesthetic side. I think early on it's about having conversations about how spaces can be designed to be adaptable at their very core in real time, and that kind of longevity, especially with lighting, how can we create something that is useful for multiple potential tenants and multiple potential users simultaneously.
Okay, and Chris, from your perspective, working for a lighting manufacturer, surely, again, longevity is something that you kind of want to shout about in your products. You want to say that we make stuff that lasts a long time.
Hello. I'm very worried about how this is going to sound. Yeah, cool. Yeah, of course, I think that comes down to, like myself, the individual. So I deliberately wanted to work with Orluna specifically because of the longevity in their products. So they have a sort of bezel and baffle self-assembly design, which we can touch on a bit later. But through that design, they offer a 20-year guarantee. So if that isn't longevity, I don't really know what is.
So, are there any applications or reasons why you wouldn't design for longevity?
I think only temporary installations. It has been like, in projects I have been requested that it would last only for like a month or 2, and then obviously you cannot give them something that will last longer. So the client doesn't want that because the place is going to be completely transformed into something else. So for instance, one was a pop-up shop. Then the next time it will be a theater. So it's a warehouse or something like that. So that instance you cannot plan for longevity. So you just have to plan for flexibility.
Yeah, I suppose I was going to say that's probably where adaptability kind of comes into it. It's like they're 2 sides of the same coin, I guess.
I think there are instances obviously where potential clients, especially if they're kind of more boutique, kind of high-end brands, their kind of business model and their KPIs demands more specific kind of experiential spaces, and it's more and more necessary now with kind of ever-competing environments to sometimes create like a kind of immersive experience. So the more specific spaces become, I guess, even if you're going for a kind of aesthetic longevity, sort of specifying the brass lights and the £3,000 pendant from 2021. Ironically, this stuff doesn't age very well because it's too specific. So I think if from the early stages of a project, you can work with the clients, as we have in many instances, to try and change their minds about how the space might be used and not necessarily go for very particular kind of now flavours and something that will age well just by virtue of it being much more open to change as kind of consumer trends and lifestyle and the way that you use the space adapts.
Yeah, sure. So something that I was kind of thinking about, I've realised as you guys have been speaking that this might have been a silly question, but at first I thought, do adaptability and longevity kind of sit at odds with each other? And can a space be both designed for adaptability and longevity? And if so, how?
I don't think they see the odds. They actually go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Like Jack is saying, a classic design will stand the test of time. That's why they become classic, right? So for me, lighting, if it can be invisible, that would be the best. Because it means that it's doing the work silently and letting the architecture and the use work its way. And then adaptability for me and flexibility will be that you have in your lighting scheme an option to make the space grow, to change, to add things, to remove things, rather than just saying like, oh, we have to strip out everything. Rather than say, okay, the chandelier seems outdated, now we need something more modern, then you change that, and by that, you completely change the look of the space. So by making these little concessions and allowances, it means that the design stands the proof of time, but it's also more flexible and adaptable. So it kind of future-proofs it.
Yeah, sure. And future-proofing is a term that obviously, I'm sure, how many of you haven't heard the term future-proof design before? Okay, so obviously that's something that gets sort of bandied around a lot in any project, whether that's from a design perspective or from a manufacturing perspective. So with that in mind, how can, I suppose you guys first, how can designers create systems that evolve with changing use, and then not just changing use of the space or aesthetics, but things like shifting regulations and new technologies and things like that?
I think if you know the products you're using, like for me, I will not go for the newest technology ever. I will go for something that is tried and tested, because that will give you a certainty that systems work. If you have a lighting control system that can be adapted with time, so you can increase modules, you can remove them, and program them differently, then yes, that's a go for a project. For luminaires itself, it's like sometimes just looking that the luminary is not like a seal module, that you can actually change engines, and then that will like actually benefit like the efficacy of the product, because maybe the LED engine that you started like 7 years ago, now it's like not in the regulations for now, right? So you can just update the module and then you have a perfect luminaire. So that's it.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. So as I was sort of alluding to earlier, I think a lot of our work, that's, for example, like in hospitality or event spaces or kind of hybrid models that encompass lots of different uses. I was thinking of a bar in particular we did in Nine Elms, where the client was the team that runs like the bars at the Prim Works and have the drum sheds, and they do sort of like year-round festivals and so on. They wanted to have a permanent venue, but they wanted like a high-end restaurant experience, but they also wanted to be able to move all the furniture and have like DJ booths and bands. So we kind of designed this system for them, which was using a very high-end lighting brand. We used XL, and it was all about kind of adaptability in real time. So we created a grid, and we created these bespoke fittings that sat over the grid, and you could kind of move stuff around and plug it. And it's really interesting because they actually, the bar wasn't open very long, and it's actually had 2 tenants since then in 6 years, but they've all kept the same lighting system. So obviously, and ironically, we actually won an award for the second design. So there was an Irish cocktail bar crew that came in and refitted, but kept all of the lighting the same. So yeah, I think if you can, that's what these active ingredients are, but if you can design something that isn't shouty and aesthetically like dominating and works really well with the space and is quieter and more complementary, I think that's a really good way to approach design.
But that's one of the best compliments you can have, isn't it? When you know that like the tenants change, but what you did originally works.
Yes.
So I think for me that's something that always makes me very happy when I go to a very old project and say like, oh, you're still working, even if they change these or move like something, it's still working.
Now it's an American bar, so I'm not quite sure. We only did it twice, so the third time was a bit.
So on that then, Chris, I want to know what you think about this. When you hear Magdelana saying that she prefers products that are slightly older and doesn't immediately go to the new technology. So as a manufacturer, how do you approach that? Like, and how do you, I guess, design and develop your products so that they can last and adapt with sort of new technologies and changing regulations and things like that?
Well, I have to disclaim I'm not a product designer, so anyone out there, do not scream at me. But it's, I can hear a few in my ear. I imagine they probably say something along the lines of, to get there first, you'd have to do extensive research, extensive testing. Even when you think the testing is done and the product's released, do more testing. Is there ways to tweak anything? Is there ways to improve something? Don't rest on your laurels and assume you have a good product. But how do you keep moving forward with it? Second would be making sure you're working with quality suppliers. So quality in sort of two senses of the word. So one, I think Magdelana said earlier, working with industry-leading suppliers, proven tested sort of components, but also as well maybe the smaller components that you don't see on a light fitting that are sort of hidden, making sure they are also quality and durable and they sort of, as you say, last. Then the third step, I imagine, would be something along the design of the product. So how can I design something that lasts? Is it going to be a self-assembly product rather than one complete sealed unit lighting, which we have a lot of issues with in the lighting industry at the moment in terms of a one-stop shop sealed unit. So yeah, how do I do that? For example, at Orluna we have a self-assembly bezel and baffle sort of system. If there were to be new technology that comes out or a more efficient way of saving energy, that engine is literally a case of swapping out the LED and then putting it back in, it'll sit in the same engine, go back onto the same bezel, and go back into the ceiling. So it's how can I simplify the design to make sure I can switch out any component and it still complements the same as it goes back in.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of ties into another point that I was going to ask about in terms of sort of longevity and timelessness. And I suppose having that ability to take a product apart and swap out key components within it and put it back together is one element of that. But also, I guess, the visual design of it as well helps as well. Because, I mean, not to plug you guys too much, but Orluna as a brand is quite sort of clean in terms of the product design. So it's not something that is sort of would age out of trends.
No, I mean, you are right. I mean, that's why we're one of the sort of highest UK lighting solutions that is out there. But it's not just about the longevity. It's things like we have a wide, extensive product range that all are one size. So, for example, that bezel on the front, which you can design a multitude of ways, takes the same engine. So, if you were to consistently have, say, 6 80mm downlights on a project, you can have 6 different bezels, get the same consistency and quality of light, and create a completely different feel in each sort of area of that project, while still getting that adaptability of the same cutout. So if you were to change in the future, you can use the same cutout, things like this. So yeah, but I imagine you probably have something different to say in terms of being an architect.
I was going to say first that we should probably work together.
Yeah. Well, we have to have very very limited lines. So I hear that architects like less lines.
Yeah, I guess from a design architectural point of view, we tend to see aesthetics taking over the conversation about timelessness, and timelessness becomes this kind of grassy Scandinavian independent, and it's sort of like, it's timeless. But I think actually for us, I guess ironically, the less present we make the light fittings, I start calling it like quiet, almost like invisible design. I think one of our most prominent projects, Spifford House, which was published all over the world and won some awards, and it really made our reputation when we started out. And in that project, you can almost see no lighting. It's all either plastered fittings, concealed fittings, a balance of like we say.
Glare control.
Well, yeah. So that everything's controlled, but it's almost like we're not relying on a particular style of pendant or the lighting to do too much work. And I think in that sense, it becomes quite timeless. And yeah, it's really funny actually, because it's so minimal, and the whole family lives there. But we've been back like 3 or 4 years later, and it's exactly the same. And it's really living that kind of lifestyle. So I think. Yeah, a way to look at longevity might be to make lighting potentially more systematically less prominent, more invisible, and therefore more attuned to various sort of future configurations.
Yeah. Magdelana, you're nodding your head, I guess you agree with me.
Is that the simplicity of the design? I think like downlights, spotlights, everything. The simplest it is, it's easier for the eye to ignore it. You forget that it's there. It's just doing its job. So then the architecture is the one that pops out and it comes to life. Or then, as a residential, you can have a house that leaves. You don't have to be saying like, it's that. You know, it's like that's annoying, and that's when it becomes something that you have to fix.
Or design can be supplemented with just a really expensive, massive fitting. You know,
Yeah.
there's that donut-shaped one, for example. No disrespect to the donut-shaped one. It's like, you know, it's like sometimes it can be too dominating, and I think, you know,
Yeah.
it might be the first thing.
And that's what gets actually outdated. Because
Yes.
you say like, oh, for now it's trendy, it works for the next 5 years. But in 7, it's not.
I think it's really interesting, the kind of the contrast between timelessness and aesthetics. And to what you were talking about, Jack, it sounds like timelessness, in a way, can become an aesthetic, which dates it, which means it's not timeless, which is kind of can give you a headache if you think about it too much. But so I kind of, with that contrast between timelessness and aesthetics, how do you balance this? And is, like, projects that you guys have worked on, has the design ever been guided by a client that's keen to ensure that their project is quote unquote on trend?
Well, I mean, as I say, we work with a broad range of workspaces and hospitality spaces and retail and leisure schemes and more kind of blended kind of operations, especially around like paddle and wellness and retail and, you know, lots of uses. And I think within that, one of the most important things is flexibility and the ability to do lots of things at once. So I think the timeless, again, I suppose timelessness for us comes through sort of a bit of a less is more approach and sort of understatement, and we're not necessarily relying on very ostentatious, you know, light statements. And I think creating even in our own studio, I said before, like we have a post-pandemic, we found that this is more and more common now. People want spaces like that. So in our studio, we decided to kind of practice what we preach. So we have like a brunch cafe and an architecture studio, and in the basement there's like an art project space and a commercial kitchen, and then we do filming in there sometimes. Like BBC just came into film, and you see some Magdelana in there. So it's Joanna Lumley with phallic shaped foam in the coffee and all this kind of thing. So it's just, I mean, it's a cool experiment. I think underpinning that is a great lighting design. Obviously Magda has been involved in that as well, which just allows for a multitude of uses. So I think that's the kind of timelessness we like to.
Yeah, it's incredible how the space changes just with a few tweaks. But yeah, basically the lighting is the same.
So I suppose, is this where kind of a more layered approach comes? I mean, a layered approach is something that lighting designers talk about all the time, but I guess this is where it's kind of...
Layers.
Yeah, the layers are very important, and I guess this is where that comes in, because you can have that kind of core base layer of lighting, which is what is timeless, and that's something that stands the test of time regardless of the use of the space. And then you can add on the additional sort of, you know, on-trend embellishments if you need to.
Yeah, it's the basic principles of lighting, and yes, we had this discussion about layering lights and so on. But I think in this case, when you want longevity for a project, it's very important that you have the layers right. And I always say to my clients, put the lighting where you need it. Not just put things symmetrically, because it would look nice in the ceiling, but it's very rarely that people go like walking like this, unless like you're a lighting designer. But all the rest of the people go looking eye level and not also the floor. So I don't care about like you have an even illumination on the floor, because I don't go walking like this. I just go looking at the front, looking at people, looking at areas. So if we can layer and create a general lighting that is sufficient for you to move around safely. Another one that is for the task you have. Whether it's a restaurant, you want to focus on the table and the person you're having a dinner with. Maybe you have display dishes or somewhere like that, so, or you have a bar. So then you have all these little add-ups, and then you want to add a little bit of character, then that's where you put your statement pieces. Something decorative, and say like, okay, this is the character of the place, but the rest is basically just adding up to the system, and that allows you to have a place that goes from morning, very busy, wake-up call, they want everything quick and ready, right? Then later on you can have a workspace, and later on you can have like a time for relax and catch up and drinks, and then in the evening it just becomes a very social place. And that's the only way you can achieve it, because if you have one light and try to do everything, it will never happen.
I think expectation management is quite important in that, isn't it? Because I feel like doing what we do at our studio, the expectation of what you get is quite, and even especially like residential, as you made the mistake of purchasing my own house recently as an architect, that's the worst and renovating it. So, but it's funny because when I thought I had it down, I had like, I'm going to go for a very simple pendant in the living room, and I'm going to rely on like perimeter lighting, and it's going to be really nice. And then my builder came and was like, oh, your lighting is crap. So it's like, no, it's great. I love it. But I think that's so. I think there is it's like a it's part of the palette, isn't it? I suppose, and you're almost orchestrating how people experience the space a bit. And obviously, there's room for
You fumbled that one second.
he was clearly wrong, but
But there is also preferences, right? Because some people like to have top light when they're at home. Some other people like me, we hate it. I prefer like low level light and everything hidden away. So it's a matter also of preferences, how you use the space, how you move around.
Sure. And Chris, I just wanted to ask you about something that Magdelana said about you don't want one light fitting that does everything. So is that something that you try not to do, I guess, is to say, like, here's one thing that can solve all your problems. It's more about a suite, I guess.
The magic light.
I don't want to go against you, but I feel that's quite a subjective thing. So you might have someone that has the opinion of in every room they will use a different fitting for a different feel or a different atmosphere. Then you get other people that maybe they're a creature of habit and they sort of prefer an aesthetic look throughout the whole building or the whole house, whatever the case may be. In that case, absolutely you can use the same product to do different things, whether it's different colour temperatures or beam angles or whatever the case may be. I think, just my opinion, sorry, that's a subjective thing, I think, just my own opinion.
Don't worry, I mean, we like having different opinions. I mean, panels are boring if everyone agrees with each other.
selection fitting is quite important. Because I find that nothing worse when I go into a living room and I see like plastic flange fittings. I'm like, oh, it just reminds me of student housing and kind of just feels quite cold. But as soon as you plaster them in and like nice dimmer, completely changes the experience. So I think there is a.
But I mean, Chris, you don't have a light that does everything. You have like one look, but the angles they are so different, so they do all the work.
That's what I mean on the continuity standpoint. So if you had 3 different shaped bezels, aesthetically the same, but throughout your whole property they were doing different functions, then yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I went to a site last week and it was like an airport. It was the whole building was like 6,500 and they loved it. Like, this woman was literally like, this is what I want. Like, you can't deter me from it. This is what I'm used to. This is what I really like. And in that instance, that's what I mean by preference. So someone literally like, and you can educate so much, but if someone is really has a strong will of what they want, it's not really for me to sort of go against what they want. So first and foremost, it's what does the client want, and then it's down to you to try and make that happen through any means.
It kind of pushes the limits of the customer's always right.
Well, the good thing is, if you're a half-decent manufacturer, you can pretty much accommodate most things. So it's really a case of, I know we're going to get the topic, but it's really a case of just listening to the customer what they want, and then sort of trying to tailor-make it to, because ultimately their house or whatnot is their personal space. You can't get anything more personal at home, so you've really got to listen to what they want.
Okay, so kind of shifting it back on topic a little bit. Jack, you mentioned projects post-COVID, and I wonder if, it feels in 2026 to still be talking about post-COVID is a bit like, it was how long ago, but have you noticed a shift in requirements for spaces to be more adaptable recently? We see like workspaces, to your point, are kind of more open plan, they've got co-working spaces, they've got cafes, they turn into event spaces in the evening. So with that kind of need for adaptability, how do you approach these spaces and design for that kind of level of flexibility?
I feel like we've just entered a niche of doing that, so I feel like it's a bit skewed because we see it a lot because that's people come to us for that. I think probably post-COVID, there was a lot of talk about the workspace of the future, and suddenly that just ended up translating into adding a few more slides and a few more swings, and a couple more breakout spaces, doing exactly the same thing as before, because people obviously don't like change that much, or it's hard to convince. But I think within that, you're always going to get that, the kind of cat A, cat B in the city. It's always going to be roughly the same. Albeit it's changing a bit, but based on some of the principles. But I think as business models, so we do quite a lot of, for example, like paddle schemes are popping up, and they're not just paddle. They could be like a members club, or they obviously have a bit of retail. They might have a wellness facility attached. There's some conference spaces, so it becomes very like multi-purpose destination. And I think that, and a lot of the space, even we used to do a lot of work like Ballymore and other developers who just have like lots of commercial space, and they said, what do we do with it? So perhaps come up with some ideas about how this can be a multifunctional workspace and community space and bar and restaurant, and so I think that just tends to be the kind of project we look at. So it's definitely there, and I think it just takes spaces that are kind of potentially, we've had so many times developers said this is kind of like an unlettable unit, but we've made something of it. We've done a kind of feasibility stage and concept design of what it could be, and then they've attracted tenants based on that. So I think it's a mixed bag. There's a lot of that, but there's a lot of going back to business as usual as well. So
yeah. I mean, I've very recently got very big into paddles, so I want to know more about these projects. So Magdelana, from a lighting perspective, have you got anything you'd like to add on to what Jack was talking about?
Well, I think for us there has been a bigger requirement because people, they don't like the standard office lighting anymore. So now it has to be more like homey. People realize like, when I'm home I feel cozy and then I can work more, or so people are the opposite, right? So we have to make people, like working spaces more enticable for people, so they can have a formal area where they can work, some areas that are more chilled, because people, I think they realize there has to be a balance between work and life. Also, many places now, they have become a little bit like, they're struggling, like retail is struggling because of all the e-commerce. So they want to attract people, and the way to attract people is like, okay, I have a retail area, it has a little bit of a coffee, and they can also people stay come and work. So you have to cater for all these kind of different uses. And I think it's great because it's a challenge. How can you make that a simple lighting design that will work and actually fit the bill?
So how do you?
Well, it depends. The space is space, to be honest. But yeah, it's like using different systems, layering up, adding control system. It can be very simple control system. It can be a more like fancy one if they need to. But I think now it's a need for having a control system. You cannot just go ahead with a simple switch.
Quite a lot of the time, your client might actually be the landlord, the developer, not just the end user. So you're kind of accountable to them as well. So the work with the design, they might be part funding the capex, for example. So I think looking at how you take like a retail space, like how can that lighting be designed so that if they go, someone else can come in really easily. I think that's really important. So the conversation needs to be quite broad, and obviously usually involves more than just the tenants.
Okay. So where does budget come into all of this? So lighting is often one of the first things on the budget to be downgraded, as I'm sure you experienced, Magdelana, but it can have the most impact on a space. So how do you demonstrate that an initial investment on good quality lighting design and good quality lighting products is worth the outlay compared to cheaper, low quality alternatives that don't have that longevity to them?
Reliability of manufacturers. That's what I don't like, to know technology that hasn't been tested. I don't want to be like the first one to use something. I want something that has been tried and tested. Every product that I specify in projects is something that I have touched, I have seen, I have tested, and I know. Otherwise I don't go into projects. I don't go always top of the line, so I also don't go to the cheapest B&Q kind of quality. I just go for somewhere that will give each client what they need, and I try to put the lighting where they need it. Not extra, because many people have the impression, you're a lighting designer, you're going to be more expensive because you will add lots of light. In many projects I have done, I just came with a red line and remove, and the architect started to panic. He was like, oh my god, you're removing the lights. And they're like, no, I'm promising you have what you are looking for, because if you have everything like a runway, you're not going to feel this drama that you want to create. So we're giving space for all this. So budget is one of the things that clients always try to cut off from lighting. But I tell them it's better that you invest in proper downlights than in a big chandelier, because the chandelier you're going to change eventually. But if you have a proper downlighting system, it will remain. So quality, and they know it when they see it.
Sure. And Chris, from your perspective, have you got anything left to add there?
Yeah, I think it's not really a sexy answer, but it's more of a case of just getting it in your client's hands, just get the product in their hands so you can see it, because I could say the best word salad paragraph you ever heard, but unless you actually physically see it, sometimes that's what you need to actually, I don't like the word convince, but persuade the client that they're not making an error or a misjudgment, but maybe just double think what you're doing, because this is what we actually can do, this is how it can enhance the space, and this is actually going to elevate everything else in the room as well. There's no point having a £30,000 like table if good quality light isn't going to sort of bring it to life. So these fabrics, these materials won't look as good as the quality of light isn't as equal in the room.
No, but I think that's exactly right. You can have the best scheme in the world, but if it's poorly lit, it just sort of falls apart. It's a challenging one though. I think the priorities of the client are really important. It is hard to convince them to spend more money, and obviously the very first thing you get a question about when you tender is from the main contractor saying, these £500 fittings, I've got a mate, or I've got a company that can do it for like 50 quid, and it's hard to, because a lot of the time a project manager and a QS will stand between you and the client, especially working commercial. And
that's where I come back to you.
Yeah.
Jack, trying to change this guy.
That's exactly my discount. It's really difficult because there's one example which I used earlier, which was about the scheme that survived many iterations, and we were able to push through the high quality lighting because we knew that the actual client, the developer's family, were expecting a super high level finish. It was the one thing from the very beginning we were really on, because if the lighting didn't work, the whole scheme didn't work. The finishes were always secondary. That's not always the case, and sometimes you do lose the argument. And it's just up to the tenant might say I don't care. So how do you? But if they do care and you can make that case from the beginning, you should, because it's a hugely.
And I think it's very tricky because you might have something on the price list, and the client would think is like, well, this luminaire is very expensive, but you only have a couple in the project, where you have something else, LED strips or something else, and it's like, okay, we can change that spec without affecting the design, and that's where we can value engineer. But also, it's very difficult with lighting just to say from a screen or from a table. So you have to feel it. And many times when I come to mock-ups, that's when the clients say, okay, this is it, this is what we want, because you put two things side by side and say, this is what you're proposing, this is what I have. You make a pick.
The sales pitch is really hard. I worked on a hotel project recently, and I was working with the contractor team, and the client was very hard on them. And I was just with the design now, like, there's no more money for anything, and anything that you. And then as soon as their interior designer came in and these £5,000 fitted, they were like putty in his hand. And and suddenly there was this huge budget for this extra stuff. So he just had a really good way of portraying, relaying the value of the spend. And I think that's something that designers just need to hone their skills with. It's just how can you really get fluent and making sure the client knows that it's not just cash, it's also quality.
We actually have another panel tomorrow, which is all about the value of lighting. So I think you guys should come back for that. Kind of picking up where this one left off. But looking at the time, I have a couple of questions left, and I want you guys to be thinking about some questions too for when I come to you. But before then, I kind of wanted to ask about sustainability, because that's something that is such a big topic in the industry. Everyone's talking about it. And particularly a movement towards more circular design. And I guess this comes in lighting design, but specifically in product manufacturing as well. So to what extent does a circular approach aid in both longevity and flexibility? And how are you adapting the circular economy into your work? I'm going to start with you, Chris.
Thank you.
No pressure.
It's a mouthful. Well, to be honest, anyone that knows Orluna or has worked with them, they should know that they were already a circular company throughout. So that's sort of first and foremost to the latter end of the question is how are we sort of incorporating it? We're already there. We spent X amount of years doing it, so we are fully circular with our products. Can you repeat the first part of the question?
It was about using that to kind of aid longevity in your work, I guess. But if it's something that's a factor of what you guys do as a company, then
yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the main reason that people tend to work for Orluna is, I mentioned at the beginning, that 20-year guarantee, which ties into longevity, timelessness, all these sort of words we've mentioned on. You know, if you have a product that is a self-assembly product with a baffle and design, or two parts, for example, one part is completely non-electrical, so there's no reason to take any more materials or reuse materials, and if any element needs to be changed, it's probably the LED, which would then come back to us. We change that out, you put it back in, it goes back to you, and you put that bezel back on. You know, we're already saving a huge amount of materials over a project lifespan, as opposed to, you may have heard me say it before, one life mentality or one use mentality. A lot of steel units, they come out of the ceiling, they go to the landfill, you get a new product come to you, and we're using all these plastics, aluminiums, whatever the case may be, on a new fitting that we don't actually need to use. So I think sustainability is can be a bit of a buzzword, and I think again it comes back to the person you're dealing with and how passionate they are about it. It might just be a tick box exercise for some people, but some people might actually really want to sort of go into the nooks and crannies, as they say, of is that company truly sustainable, or they just say it to sort of fit in. So I think as much as it's my job to educate people on it, it's also, you know, the client's job is to actually research as well in terms of, you know, what that company does. So yeah.
okay. And I suppose from a designer's perspective then, when it comes to being more circular in your approaches, is it a case of just specifying brands that are making products in a circular way, or are there other factors that come into play as well?
I think it all counts, but for me, it's like I said, I never specify something I haven't tested, so I have to know the company, what they stand for, what they do, because there is lots of greenwashing and there are so many buzzwords. So for me, first of all, sustainability starts from the design point. I'm not going to over-specify a luminaire that I have to lean down to 10% to work and be comfortable, because that simply, I don't want my client to pay for something he's not using. So energy-wise, I try to use just what is necessary and not put over the top. Controls is another point. That if you have controls, you're not wasting the energy when you don't need it, only when it's necessary. Reviewing the company that you're working with. So if you can replace engines or lenses or something to adapt the design, for me that's a plus. What happens with the materials, where they're coming from, what happens at the end of the life, it's very important to know. Because also if they have to travel around the world, we're not helping much, right? If they have like precious metals that are very difficult to get, we're also not helping. So if the components can be recycled, can be transformed, that's great. Even things like painting, packaging, it all counts. Like the minimal packaging makes it better for transportation.
I was about to say, like, normally you can get a good understanding of the company if they're sustainable by the packaging.
But there is a trick that many people now are doing very nice cardboard packaging, but the product is still the same. It has been the same for the last 20 years. Yeah. So we have to be careful also on that and research, at least for my end.
Yeah, sure.
There seems to be a lot of lights that have that amazing packaging and that sustainable mission. It's a bit greenwashy, because then you might find that an LED bulb breaks after like 3 years, you know, because it's very fine filaments and so on. I guess for us it's about how long the space will last, and I think, you know, so I've been in my business now for about 7 years. If in another 7 years I go to one of those spaces that we did right at the beginning and they're still using the same light, that was good. I think the sustainability to me, that if you can get it through, it says 15-year lifespan. If you get to the end of that 15 years,
that's part of the research. A lot of manufacturers, or any good manufacturer, when you're looking at their data sheets or whatnot, it'll tell you the life expectancy of that LED. So that's another. When I said about putting the product in front of the client and sort of demonstrating, that's another thing as well. Is one is showing them, but two, also educating them on, okay, you might have this different lamp, but you're going to have to change it 30, 40, 50 times throughout the course of its life, and that in itself is going to cost more than a small uplift that you're considering for this product. So
there are lots of new brands which potentially aren't as tested, and they, you know, so I think it's important to, I think what you're saying, know the brand and specify. Know the brand and specify the quality products, because it's only as sustainable as its lifespan.
Yeah, I think some clients, they think it's like, oh, but you know what you're doing, just to specify the things. They don't realize that we do lots of research behind it, and this is part of the research. It's not just having the right product, it's like the right product for the right reasons. So, and this is one of the big ones that we were discussing full in depth about how are your circularity like really working and the production of the new products.
So, I am mindful of the time, and I want to see if any of our audience has a question for our panellists. Has anyone got anything they'd like to share?
I've got a question. Oh no, I hate the sound of my own voice. Thank you for that. It was a really interesting discussion. You guys have spoken about kind of core design principles, which were really interesting. Practicality, aesthetics, colour temperature, beam angles, kind of bezel styles. I'd just be really interested to understand your perspective on health and well-being in lighting. So kind of to the core of it, circadian rhythm, colour spectrums, things like that.
That's a hot topic. I'm very emotional about it.
Oh, okay.
Because I think, first of all, my job is to design lighting not for spaces, but for people. Because it's not just architecture, you can be in an outdoor space, and for me that's very important. So color temperatures, how our body moves, how we react, it has a very big impact. Since I started lighting 20-something years ago, I noticed a shift. And I think now we're more deficient of good lighting, day lighting.
Yeah.
Because we are most of the time indoors, and LED has a little bit of like this gap, and there is lots of research at the moment about that, like what is like the UV factor that we're getting, like infrared and so on. Because as human beings we think we're very evolved, but actually we haven't evolved that much. We are very primal, so we still respond to the same principles, and lighting is a very, very important one. So I always try to take care of how I'm designing spaces and how it will affect people, because as you can design a hospital and for people who work shifts, okay, then you have them like alert, and that's how they need to be, but how this alertness is going to affect them in their lifestyle, because as they are shifting their biological clocks, that will cause other health problems, because then their immune system is going to be compromised because it's working harder, it's working overtime. And I do the same for lighting for plants, because people say like, oh, now we have like great indoor space, it's very green and blah, blah, blah. I say, you just need to push the lighting. It's like, yeah, how long for? Because if we're stimulating plants, we will kill them faster. And we're doing the same with ourselves. We just need to be aware of how we're using the light, the color temperature, and the levels we're giving them at the right time. Because cool light is very good if you use it very early in the morning, because you're raising your system so you are awake, and then you can perform better. Towards the end of the day, you need a warmer light, a dimmer light, because that's what we're used to. You are preparing your system to slow down, shut down, and go to sleep, so it can do all the repair processes. So, sorry, I can go on forever.
I'll probably just add to that CRI as well, good colour rendering index. So very brief answer, but yeah, CRI.
Brilliant, thank you.
Do we have any more questions? Do you want to ask your final one? Do you still have one?
To be honest, I think that pretty much covers everything that I wanted to ask, because otherwise we're just going to end up going down different alleyways and have a whole bunch of different talks, and we've got a full programme to get to. So I think I'm going to call it there. So thanks very much to you guys for your time on the panel today. It's been really interesting. Thanks to you guys for watching.